inside. Outside, it is a hellish nightmare. It's so hot. This is what we got left in the backyard here. The rear deck cover, the center console right here, front seats there, back of the rear seats right here, and then a few other things, spare tire and a couple of trim pieces. This is the shifter bezel thing. This is the fuse block that I was showing previously. The other thing is, let me show you right now. These are the two things I want to install. This right here is essentially a cigarette lighter mount adapter thing. Focus, you fuck. There we go. So it's just a voltage display, basically. I don't 100% know where they're gonna go yet, but that's the plan. Okay, taking the doors out of an S14, pretty easy to do. This thing is behind the door lever, just like that, and there's a screw right there. So you have to take that one out, and you pop this little thing out of the door. There's a screw inside the handle, normally right here. You have to pop this out, and you actually have to undo this connector so that that can come out of the door. And then there's 3 along the bottom. 1, 2, 3. All right, so this comes out. Somehow. Okay. And then you basically lift it up. You need to pull away on the bottom. So there's going to be some push clips in there. So you pull it away like that. So the bottom's free. And then you lift up. And of course this would normally be screwed in properly, but there you go. And it's off. Ta-da! And that's the door. Yeah, there's definitely places for sound deadening in here. I reinstalled my window switch, which is now actually far improved. It used to flop a lot more than this, so I tightened up these guides at the top of the window. There's 3 of them on here. I was looking through the actual procedures for adjusting the windows, and there's a lot of adjustments you can make. I know I have a lot of wind noise in this car, and so I was checking a little bit on how the window fits all the way along the outsides here, and it looks, honestly, like compared to the spec, it looks pretty good. So I didn't really want to mess with it too much. All I changed was this. Now it's a lot more sturdy than it used to be. Plus, I decided to just raise it up a tiny bit. So there's a stopper here, and in this hole here, those are the stoppers for how high up the window goes before it stops. And I just moved them up a couple millimeters each, and I'm hoping that'll just put the window a little bit further underneath the ledge here, and hopefully reduce some of the wind noise. Also, you can see the sound deadening, hopefully reduce some of the just noise in general. And now I'm gonna go ahead and put some foam directly on top of all of that so I can maybe absorb a little bit more noise. I basically just cut random sizes of the stuff and put it everywhere because frankly, it doesn't matter. Just like a lot of the other interior panels, I did the inside of this panel just with foam. I didn't use any of the Dynamat type stuff. So that's the driver door. What I wanna show you now is I need to adjust the window. I think the window on the other side is not very good. So I'm just gonna show you why. You can see the gap between the window and this trim, very close, and then of course this is where the window curves off, so it's bigger up here, but this gap is pretty even all the way down. And if you won't be able to see it in the camera, but you kind of have to be able to look under this ledge, and you look all the way along the top of the window as well, and you don't see any gaps. You can't see the top of the window anywhere. And it actually, it kind of slides in. It's very hard to show, but because there's no frame on the outside of these windows, it actually slides up and underneath this ledge. And so that's what you want. You need it to go up and under it a little bit. First off, this gap, much smaller, which is probably okay, but you can see that it's not even as well. It isn't going up high enough, and you can see, maybe you can see in the video how low the top edge of the window is. Like, I can actually put my fingernail on the top of the window and it gets tight here, like it goes up far enough. Oh, I can't see the camera very well, it's so bright. But now it goes up inside it pretty good here, but then like right here I can see a gap again right there. And so I think in general the window needs to go, at least it has to go higher, and this is hard to explain, but it needs to tilt this way, I think, a little bit. But I might not bother with that because it's a really difficult adjustment. If this trim is accurate, the window also needs to slide forward. The whole window needs to go this way a little bit. I wanted to try and go over some of these things because I think a video would be cool if anybody else out there needs to do this kind of stuff. At least having an idea of what's in there, maybe it'll give you the confidence to try it out yourself. A couple of them are pretty obvious. There's 3 of them across the top, 3 adjusters across the top that adjust inward, outward position of the window. And generally the inside ones move and the outside ones are static. And so in order to adjust them, all you have to do is adjust the inside ones to hold the window against the outside one. The next thing is the stops, how high up the window goes. There's one on this side, that screw there, and on this side, that screw there. And if I move the window down, you can actually see this part right here. This is where the slider, or the top slider is on the window. This part here is what contacts that, that stop, I believe. And there's a similar one on this side that you can't see because it's inside the door. But these stops are pretty self-explanatory. Again, if you move them up, the window is going to move up further so that when your window is closed, you have proper gapping around the outside of it so that you have a good seal against air and water and everything else, right? So when I close this, it's not ideal, but it's not too bad. So you want to see that this gap here is fairly even, and you want to see that the window goes up underneath this ledge all the way along, and it's supposed to go under it something like 1 to 5 millimeters, somewhere around there. It kind of hits the trim a little bit before it closes, and then it slides up under it. But it's actually not nearly as close up at this front edge. And this gap is actually a little bit small, I think. So I think in my case, I actually need to slide the entire window towards the front of the car. Another adjustment that I tried is tilt. So you can, if you imagine this axis, the window can tilt this way. And I'll show you that. You have these 2 screws right here. Loosen, I'll even do this because I don't know if it's in the exact position I want, but loosen that one, loosen this one, and it actually doesn't, you can't really adjust it unless the window's down a little bit from the top. So now, if I grab this, maybe you can see the whole thing tilt. So that's this moving up and down like that. And so mine, I know it needs to sit right. I'm gonna put it basically where it was before I took this apart. I can see the wear mark, so that's where it was, and tighten it down. Okay, whew. The next thing I want to do is the speaker swap. So you can see these are just some woofers, some Infinity Kappa woofers. And so these are the new speakers I bought. Shut up! These are some Pioneer something. I don't know what they're called. 4-way speakers. So I guess that means there's like a tweeter and then like 2 mini tweeters in there. Something like that. There's like 4 speakers total in this speaker. Made in Vietnam. Anyway, I don't think these speakers are anything special. I'm just kind of hoping that I get a little bit more sound out of them, and maybe overall it'll just be a better setup than I had before. So, hopefully these will bolt in without too much trouble, which is saying a lot. Okay, with the speakers out, with one speaker out anyway, I'm just looking at a couple things here. What's interesting to me is how different they are in size. Like, this seems like such a beefy, solid speaker. It's quite a bit deeper front to back. It's got a way bigger magnet on it. It just looks like a solid unit. It looks really high quality to me. I don't know a lot about speakers, but you know, in comparison, this thing looks like kind of a dinky little, like they tried to make it look all fancy with this thing on the front and all that, but it's just so small and light in comparison. I don't know. I'm not happy with the sound from these, but I don't know if it has anything to do with the speaker itself or my head unit setup or what, but I just couldn't get enough volume. That was the big problem. I would max the volume out and I could just not get enough sound out of it. And I know it wasn't a very versatile setup because I didn't have any other size of speakers. So I think this setup will be good, and I'm happy that I'm going to keep using these in the rear deck, but I feel like this is a bit of a downgrade, and it probably is. I just don't know. This is the terminals I use, these little ring terminals. Focus, you these little ring terminals, they're just like standard crimp, non-insulated terminals. And I used them on these connectors, even though I'm sure there's some proper like brass ones that go with these. I didn't have the proper ones at the time. Those worked perfectly fine. These new ones will use these little push-on ones, and they actually come with pre-made insulated connectors, which is kind of cool, except that now I have to replace that with these. I do everything with crimps now. Even these back in the day, I soldered all of this, and I soldered everything for the actual radio connection. But nowadays, everything that I did for my wiring harness is all crimp connectors, and I just think crimp connectors are better. I think they're easier to use. You don't need to have any electricity, like you don't have to have a soldering iron. Solder is it's tricky to do. You have to have like 3 hands to do it, and my soldering is really bad. So crimps are just kind of less problem for me, and I think they're generally just better. They don't have any issues with heat, which is a problem in cars a lot of the time. So in general, I recommend using crimp connectors. I use non-insulated connectors, and I just use shrink wrap over them. So you'll see them. I don't think I'll actually record any of my putting this together, but I'll show you after it's done. And crimp connectors are just nice. So I got one side done. I just wanted to show one quick clip of doing the wiring here. I know which is positive and negative. This is the negative terminal for the new speakers, for the Pioneer ones. And I already crimped this connector on one side, and I'll just show you the other half of it. So the first thing you have to remember, obviously, same as soldering, you have to remember to put your shrink wrap on first. The one difference is if you're soldering this, you can't have the shrink all that close because it'll get hot. But in this case, it doesn't matter because it's not going to get hot. I grab my crimpers, and I give it a couple clicks. And in this case, it's not actually optimal. This is kind of a crappy situation for crimping, because this is an 18 gauge, this new wire, and this is a 16 gauge over here. And those are kind of two different sizes of crimps, but it'll work anyway. So this is an 18 gauge crimp that I put on it. So it'll fit onto a 16. It's not ideal, but it's a little small, but it'll work. So I need to just put the crimp in the right size, and I'll just barely hold it, and it should get one click. So there, so it's actually holding the crimp with a little bit of pressure. Thread the wire, obviously the stripped wire, into the crimp connector, like so. Probably can't see any of this, but now that it's in there, you just need to close down on your crimpers. Boom. So there you go, crimp connection right there, and then you just slide it over the connector like so, and then you get your torch. I use a torch lighter like this so I can do it outside and it doesn't get affected by the wind. And again, I need more hands, but last. I got this door all together. I got the speakers in the rear deck. This was horribly difficult compared to what it should have been. It's just they don't quite fit properly. The screw holes are a little bit out of place. The sheet metal here normally would have sheet metal screws in it, but the screws are way bigger than these slots. So instead I got these M4 bolts that I got some, you can see just washers and nuts on the other side of. It's held in like really solid. It's not moving. Finally, it's in. I'm gonna get the rear deck in here. I'm gonna get the seats in here, and I'm gonna finish, I hope, some kind of resembling a car before the end of today. I'd really like to be done.